Good evening, I'm Oral Gibbs, and welcome to Speaking of Everything. And with me this evening, I have none other than Mr. Tadzio Bervoets. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. It's a great pleasure to be here as always, and good evening to the viewers as well. So I'm always very happy to be here and talk to you about nature.
Well, it's good to have you here in the program, and thanks for accepting the invitation because
Anytime.
you're the manager for Nature Foundation St. Maarten. And it's been quite a while since I had you in the program. And how long now since you've been manager at Nature Foundation?
Actually, this year was my fifth anniversary at the Nature Foundation. I started, if I'm not mistaken, on the 15th of May 2010.
Okay.
So this year in May, I had 5 years at the foundation, which flew by really. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I look back that it was 5 years of being at the foundation and working here on St. Maarten for Nature. So it's been quite a ride, but me specifically and my colleagues, we love what we do, so we look forward to at least 5 more years.
So are you surprised when you look back at when you started and today in terms of nature on the island?
Yeah, I mean, we did have, of course, it's always a challenge, it's a challenging sector to be working in, trying to protect the environment, making people aware of the importance of environmental protection, conservation, sustainable development. But I mean, we've had our ups and downs, but in general, I look back with satisfaction on the past 5 years. A few big things have happened. For example, establishment of the marine park. Since we were established in 1997, we have always had, had that need to establish a marine park. I mean, the foundation was established specifically to set up a marine park for St. Maarten. So when that happened in 2011, or very early 2011, we were very happy, and it is quite a milestone for St. Maarten to finally have had that marine park established. But other things as well, the education program that we have been doing, so introducing especially the young people to the environment and the importance of protecting and conserving our natural resources. That has been going well. And other things, species conservation, our sea turtle network, the work that we're doing with sharks. Of course, the foundation, as many foundations on St. Maarten, have some financial challenges. We are underfunded, we are short-staffed. I mean, it's just 3 of us doing all that work. Luckily, we have a very dedicated board. I mean, I couldn't be happy with the board members that we have at the Nature Foundation. So we make it work, but with any organization, especially an organization such as ours, we've had our ups and downs, but we tend to just focus on the ups that we have been having.
Are you surprised in terms of the population and the awareness of nature?
I mean, I think it's increasing. I think we have been doing a reasonable job, not only the Nature Foundation, but also the other environmental organizations, EPIC, St. Maarten Pride. I think we all have been doing a good job in making the people aware. For example, the Nature Foundation, everything that we do has some type of communication component to it. We let people know why we do certain things, why we think it's important to protect nature, why it's important to have sustainable development, not only for protecting nature or protecting the environment, but also for the economy of the island. So I think it's building. Of course, it's not where it should be. When you look at other islands in the region, not very far away, for example, right there in Saba, although it's a little bit different, the population there is much more aware of the importance of protecting their environment. If you look at bigger islands such as Tortola, Antigua, especially the USVI, they're a little bit more advanced than we are in our thinking on why it's important to protect the environment, not only for protecting the environment's sake, but also for the economy of the island. For example, tourism rest very heavily on being able to provide tourism product that has clean water and greenery. So it's still one of our most important tasks to continue to create that awareness. Of course, some things happen that which people rally behind. If there's, for example, an incident where sand is dumped illegally, or if there's an oil spill, you really realize that people are starting to pick up why it's so important that nature protection, nature conservation happens. But I think it's a continuing process. I think there will never be a point where we can say, okay, we have finished our task of making the public aware. I think it's a continuing process of, communicating to the population, to the community, to decision makers, why it's important that nature is protected.
As a little boy growing up on this island, we used to play in the Great Salt Pond because the dump wasn't there at the time. And we never saw fish in the Great Salt Pond. We saw birds and everything else, and there was fish in the fresh pond. Mm-hmm. Today now, many decades later, almost every 5 or 6 months, you're seeing tilapia. Tilapia is a fish we never saw growing up in St. Maarten. And then we've seen all this die-off of tilapia fish in the Great Salt Pond. And I noticed that Nature Foundation is oftentimes involved in that in terms of educating the public and the cleanup. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, the issue with the Great Salt Pond is has many faces. I mean, there's various issues that the pond is faced with. Firstly, I can talk about protecting the environment, having a marine park, wanting to establish a terrestrial park, protecting our beaches, etc., as much as I want. But until we do something about our waste management issues in general, and more specifically about the landfill in town and the dump, which is in the middle of our capital, which is in the middle of a very crucial wetland that is not only important in terms of the environment, but is also important in terms of our national heritage as St. Martiners. As long as we don't find a way to address that and address it quite quickly, we will always have an issue with regards to environment, with regards to the environment on St. Martin. I mean, you have a wasteland in the middle of our capital, in a wetland. It, as everybody knows, every few weeks or months it catches fire. When that smoke enters into the districts, it has some serious health consequences for the population. The landfill continuously leaches into the Great Salt Pond. So, all the chemicals, heavy metals, oil, all those things that are on the Phillipsburg landfill, they tend to end up in the Great Salt Pond. When there's a big rain event and the pond overflows, or if the water is pumped out, inevitably that water ends up along our beaches. So it's difficult for, it's difficult for an island that depends solely on tourism as its main economy to have that type of issue, to be dealing with that constantly in terms of bathing beaches. Compounding that is the fact that probably in the mid-2000s, so we're talking about 2004 or 2005, tilapia were introduced into the Great Salt Pond. Tilapia is a fish which is native to the east coast of Africa. So it is used to being in, fresh to brackish type of water. It was introduced into the Great Salt Pond, presumably by somebody who had a couple of hundred very small ones. But tilapia, they grow to be about 40 or 50 centimeters in just a couple of months. So in 2 months, you have, a pretty sizable fish. And a fish that's too big to comfortably hold in a tank. So they were introduced in the Great Salt Pond, and you're absolutely right. We've never seen these type of animals, these fish in the Great Salt Pond before. So what happens? The population increases. When there's period of dry weather, or when the salinity level in the Great Salt Pond increases, then you have these massive die-offs. The unfortunate thing is that one of the best ways we would have had to control the tilapia population would be, of course, to eat them. Everybody has at least once, I don't like eating them so much, but everybody has at least once had tilapia. But, because of our pollution issues in the Great Salt Pond, it's not safe to consume the fish once they get above a certain population. And then when these animals die, the Great Salt Pond, despite what many people may think, still can get quite salty. That's why it's called the Great Salt Pond. And when the salt level is too high, the tolerance level for these animals, they can only tolerate a certain amount of salt in the water. they get salt stress, so their kidneys basically fail out, and they go belly up. Which is another issue because then you have thousands of tons of rotting fish in the middle of Philipsburg, which is a big burden not only on the population in terms of smell, in terms of it attracting flies, but it also costs the government quite a bit of money, costs the taxpayers a lot of money because that money has to go towards cleaning up these fish which were invasive. So we have been looking at different ways together with the Vromi Ministry in trying to tackle the invasion. One of the things that we have done, which in the beginning was a little bit difficult for people to handle, was when there was a drought and we introduced all of that seawater in the Great Salt Pond. When we pumped the seawater in the Great Salt Pond, it caused a massive die-off, and now we're trying to see how it really affected the population, because our local fish such as bass or tarpon or mullets, for example, they can all handle high salt, while tilapia can't. So we'll see how it goes. But unfortunately, their eggs are so hardy, they can withstand so much stress that I think in the future we can expect us to at least have a few more of these big die-offs. So yeah, I mean the Great Salt Pond is it's an area of St. Maarten that is very challenged.
The lionfish, I've seen on other television shows in the States where they're eating them in other parts of the Caribbean, and we have a lot of them here in St. Maarten, right?
Yeah, I mean the lionfish is a problem that actually I started working at the foundation in May 2010, and the first lionfish that we got was the 15th of July 2010. So not long after I started, that was one of the major things that we had to deal with. Just quickly as background for some viewers who might not be familiar with what lionfish are. Lionfish are a seawater fish. They're a beautiful animal. They have these very beautiful black and white stripes, very feathery fins. They're native to the Indo-Pacific, so the Indian and Pacific Oceans. But because they're so beautiful, they were introduced. They were very popular in the aquarium trade, saltwater aquarium, and because of that, they were introduced into the Atlantic coast of the United States first in the early 90s, and afterwards they spread throughout the Caribbean, and now they range from anywhere from the Carolinas all the way south to the coast of Brazil. The problem with lionfish, number one, they're venomous. So if someone gets stung by a lionfish, you're going to have a pretty tough time. They're not deadly unless you have underlying issues, like you're particularly allergic to the venom. But I got stung about 7 times, and it's a painful experience. Secondly, because they're introduced here and our local fish species did not evolve together with lionfish, they don't have no way to defend against it. So you would just go on the reef and you would see a lionfish eat all day. In their native range where they originally come from, lionfish are about 20 to 30 centimeters. But because here they have this unendless supply of fish that they can eat, we've seen lionfish up to 40 to 50 centimeters, which is almost double of what they are in their native range. So they are a problem. They're a problem for our native fisheries, for snapper and grouper. They eat the young of them, so we want to control them as much as we can. When the lionfish first appeared in 2010, we did quite a bit of research in it. One of the research questions that we wanted to have asked is whether or not, because St. Maarten is so known to have high incidence of fish poisoning, so the kind of bacteria that causes the fish poisoning seems to be very common in St. Maarten. That's why we don't eat barracuda, for example, or dog-tooth snapper. We don't really eat it either, because these animals tend to have that toxin in them. Unfortunately, about 40% of all the fish that we tested came back positive for that.
Mean the lionfish?
Yeah, all the lionfish that we tested came back, 40% of them that we tested came back positive for it. So in order for us to be careful and to be responsible as an organization, we told people to be cautious when eating them. And that has caused people to not eat them commonly on St. Maarten. Now, in order for us to really be sure, we sent quite a bit of samples to get tested at the university in Holland at the University of Groningen. We're getting those samples back soon, and you know, I'm praying every day that that the results of those tests show that you know, lionfish, although this might be present in them, it's of such low levels that it will be safe to consume. Because in places such as, you know, even Bonaire, Aruba, and Curacao, you know, they have, you know, days where whole groups of divers go, they catch lionfish, and then they head back to the beach and have a huge cookout on the beach. And it's the best way to control the population of an animal. But you know, while we're waiting for those results to come in, we are continuing with our efforts. We go out, we shoot lionfish, we take them out from the reef. We're working together with fishermen. When they bring in a lionfish, we applied for some funding so that when people bring in a lionfish, fishermen especially, that we can give them something back for actually bringing the animal into us. We're also working on developing different ways. I just came back from a meeting in Trinidad where they discussed some new ways in trying to control the population, developing a new type of fish trap, using actual live lionfish as bait for lionfish. So, you know, when they would see a live lionfish in the area, it would attract other lionfish because they like to group together. So we're going to be working on that. We're also working on it together with some school kids as science fair projects, because we like to involve children as much as possible in our you know, sort of science experiments. So the lionfish problem, you know, it's you know, in the beginning we were trying to say get rid of the lionfish, eradicate them, but realistically speaking, with this type of invasion, we can only talk about controlling them instead of getting rid of them completely. So unfortunately, these animals are here to stay. It's just up to us to keep the population as low as possible.
What about turtles? Because I noticed you also send a lot of releases out about turtles, and it's, you know, I've never eaten turtle, and I will never eat it, and I can't imagine people from St. Maarten still eating turtle. You have a problem with people are illegally fishing turtles still?
I mean, it happens from time to time. In the 5 years that I've been working with the foundation, I think only 2 or 3 times that we've had, you know, we were confronted with an incident of poaching. It is illegal since, if I'm not mistaken, 92 or 93. They are taken up in national ordinances, making it illegal. It's also internationally, we're signatory to the International Convention on the Protection of Sea Turtles. So it is also binding, so we have to protect these animals. I understand the tradition of eating sea turtles. The problem is that right now, with the population as it is, we cannot afford to lose any sea turtles because the population is so small. They are so critically endangered that as soon as you take out one, you run the risk of really causing a complete collapse.
Is it really that bad? Because I'm surprised. I'm seeing so many pictures from you all.
Yeah, from the hatchling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be a little bit misleading because a turtle, and we've had a decent nesting season this year. We had about 13 or 14 nests so far, which is quite good. But a turtle will come on the beach. It will dig a hole. It will lay eggs. It will lay about 100 and, some species lay up to 150 eggs. Out of those 150 eggs, 80 hatchlings will hatch. Out of those 80 hatchlings that hatch, about 65 will make it to the beach. Out of those 65, if you're lucky, 1 or 2 will make it into adulthood to be able to breed. So they are so, they're such a fragile animal that that's the reason why so many of them hatch. But say for example, in a good season we've had 200 or 300 hatchlings. Out of those, you might get 4 that make it into adulthood.
And then they have birds out there.
Yeah, birds are out there.
Sea
fishes out there. I mean, I've had baby sharks patrolling. For some reason, they would know exactly when the nest is going to hatch. And when you see the hatchlings making their way into the beach, you see, they come from above the birds, and then in the waterline, you would see baby sharks patrolling as well. So the hope is that, in a few decades, the population of sea turtles will be at a level where we can suggest that they be made seasonal. But unfortunately, how it is now, we can't afford to lose any population. So And I must say the community has been very helpful in, because it's only 3 of us at the foundation. So, we rely heavily on volunteers and on calls from the community. Recently, I remember it was Halloween evening that they called me that there was a hatching on Great Bay Beach, and some kids in full Halloween costumes helped return sea turtles back to the sea. So
Wow.
it is something that the community is very involved in. Everybody loves sea turtles.
What about conchs?
Conch also, and we were happy to see that that the fisheries department put some legislation together on the maximum size of allowed for conch. So a conch has to be above a certain size for people to harvest it, and and this is great because if you take conch that are too small, eventually you take too much of them, then the population will crash, and you won't have no conch anymore.
Is there a shortage? Is there a shortage right now of conchs?
Yeah, on the Dutch side, there definitely is a shortage of conch. Conch depend heavily on seagrass beds.
Oh, okay.
And we have been struggling in ensuring that our seagrass is up to a level where it can sustain a conch population. But interestingly, when we were building the causeway in Simpson Bay, we saw a huge explosion of conch in the Simpson Bay Lagoon.
Okay.
So we moved quite a bit of them into I'm not going to say where because I don't want people to, but into different areas of the lagoon. So hopefully, those conchs that we moved are
Should be adults now, right?
are reproducing, and we'll hopefully get more conch in the next couple of years.
What about lobsters? Are lobsters in problem right now?
Lobsters are better. I mean, many people, especially from the fishing community, had some questions when we established the marine park, because when we established the marine park, we made it what is called a no-take zone. So people are not allowed to go and fish in the marine park. It's not allowed. People was like, yes, but why can't we go and fish in the area? But we tried to tell them that the reason why we have this area close to fishing is for fishing. Because whether it's a fish or a lobster, it's not as if they're going to say, okay, this is the border of the marine park, let's stay inside the marine park because we're protected in here and we won't venture out. You have something called spillover effect, which means that they would reproduce in the marine park, but of course the animals, everybody, they move out. And because these animals are protected in the marine park, we have seen an increase in the fish population outside of the marine park as well. But not only fish, but lobster as well. I mean, on some survey dives that we are doing in order to see how successful the marine park is, we have been noticing an increase in the lobster population outside of the marine park. But again, we were very happy to see that the fisheries department also put out some laws regulating the maximum size that lobsters have to be above a certain length. Female lobsters with the berries, as they are called, with the egg sacs, they have to be released so that the eggs can be fertilized and we get new lobsters. So, I mean, things are going better in that respect, despite the challenges.
It's amazing because I've been out with you all. It's a remarkable job. It's a nice job. I envy you in that job.
Yeah,
I don't think you can go there and have any problems at all. It's very peaceful.
Sometimes it's quite rough weather that we have to deal with, which makes it a little bit challenging.
But you enjoy it.
Oh yeah, I love it. I wouldn't want to change it for the world. I mean, I'm very fortunate to, on the one hand, be in contact with the community and tell them why it's important to protect nature, and a couple of hours after that, I can be in the water with sharks or with whales and dolphins or doing research dives. So, I'm very lucky. I consider myself very fortunate.
We don't have a lot of time, just about a minute, but what about sharks, very quickly? We have more increase of sharks in the waters?
We don't have an increase in sharks. We're now trying to protect them as much as we can because they are very endangered species. I mean, throughout history, they've received a very bad reputation, but they're very essential to the ecosystem because they keep the ocean in balance. So they eat the animals that would eat the smaller animals, and if you remove sharks, like the middle of the food chain would explode. They will eat all the animals below it. And when they die out, the middle food chain doesn't have anything to eat, so there's no more fish. So we're trying to change the perception of the population that sharks are important, that they're not mindless killers out to eat everybody. So yeah, I mean it's an ongoing project. It's on all the 6 islands of the Dutch Caribbean. So people can expect to hear a lot more about why it's important that we protect the sharks in our waters.
Well, Mr. Bervoets, we out of time. I want to thank you for coming in and much success at
My
the
pleasure.
Nature Foundation.
Thank you.
And that's it for now. I'll see you next time. Until then, good night. Take care. Bye.